The last time we turboed this drift kart, it had a 125cc engine, and we ended up blowing it up pretty spectacularly on the dyno. Now we have a bigger and better 150cc motor, and we have a smaller turbo, the world's smallest turbo in fact. And today we're going to install this turbo and have this thing running for the first time. Well, that's what I hope anyway. In the last video, we installed this insane aero setup on our kart. I think it looks absolutely awesome. If you haven't seen that video, definitely go back and watch it. Now, I know you're sat there behind your screen asking yourself, why the smaller turbo? Well, the current turbo that we have on the drift kart is from a 1.6 litre turbo diesel. And while it looks absolutely awesome, we only made 1.5 psi of boost with our 125cc motor on the dyno, and for me that's just not enough boost. I'm not just building this thing to be a gimmick. I actually want it to work properly and do all the turbo things, and I genuinely think we can do that, but that does mean we have to go to the smaller turbo. By the way, the link for everything that you see in this video is available in the description, so you can build your very own turbo kart. You're welcome. So for those of you who are new to this build, we are running a fuel injection setup on this motor. That means that it is controlled by an ECU. That's this guy right here. That ECU controls timing and fuel injection so that we can actually have our turbo setup running properly on this motor. We even have an electric fuel pump back here that's controlled by the ECU as well. That means we can plug a laptop into this thing and have it fully controllable, which is kind of crazy. So the first thing we need to do today is make our small VZ21 turbo work on our current setup. So the first thing we're going to do is pull the old turbo off so we can compare the differences between the two turbos. Luckily this turbo is just dummy fitted, so I think we just have to remove one bolt. So let's take a look at our two turbos and compare them. So this one has a much bigger compressor wheel and intake size. Look how tiny this one is. So this is approximately 25 millimeters big, which is hilarious. The only thing that worries me about the intake size is we want this to dose, but this wheel is so small. I have no idea whether it's actually going to make the turbo noises, but there's only one way to find out. The other noticeable differences are, of course, the flange is different on the exhaust side of the turbo. So we're going to have to modify our turbo manifold. And then at the back of the turbo, we have a V-band on the rear of this one. And on the back of this one, we do not have a V-band. Luckily, that's easily fixed. We're going to modify the rear of this, weld a V-band onto the back of it. And hopefully it's a fairly straightforward swap. Now, before we get started, I'm going to run you guys through everything that you will need if you're wanting to make your own turbo setup. Now, this should be fairly universal for any type of tiny motor, but obviously you might need to change a couple of things here and there to make it work. So the first thing you're going to need is a turbo manifold. That connects the turbo from the engine. You're obviously going to need a turbo. For anything 200cc or smaller, I highly recommend this VZ21 turbo. I think it's a much better size. Next up, you're going to need some oil lines. Now these run from the engine to the turbo and they lubricate the turbo. Make sure it stays spinning nicely and everything stays cool inside here. This is a wee sandwich plate that I got for our engine so that we can get oil in and out of the engine nicely. And then for the return side, we're going to have to do a little bit of custom work on the motor to make that work. And lastly, you'll need this custom EFI setup. I bought this setup off Alibaba. I think it was about 450 Australian dollars. It came with the ECU and all the components. It also had the throttle body with a map sensor, fuel injector, fuel pump, and it had a full wiring loom as well. That's this here. It kind of looks like spaghetti at the moment, but we are going to tidy all this up on the engine and actually make it look super nice. You'll also need some kind of exhaust system. This is our one. It's way too fancy for the setup, but we kind of went overboard with the whole thing. But anything just to get the exhaust from the turbo to the back of the kart so you're not sucking in those fumes. But now we can finally get to work installing this tiny turbo on our motor. All right, the first thing I'm going to do is just put the turbo into kind of the general position where it's going to live. So that's where the turbo is kind of going to sit, and I do not mind that much. One thing I was kind of afraid about with going smaller turbo was I didn't want it to look like too different because I really like the look of the other turbo. Obviously we're building this to be really in your face. So the next thing we need to see is whether our turbo manifold is going to work for us without making too many modifications. We know we need to change this flange to suit the new turbo. All right, so I've got that slipped in there and immediately we have hit our first problem with the setup. So if we come around here, we can see that this is where the flange sits for the old turbo, because the old turbo has this like banana looking thing coming off it, so it's quite far away, whereas the new turbo is much more compact and it's closer to the exhaust housing, which means we're going to have to remake the turbo manifold to suit. So yeah, to make that work, we've got some cutting and some welding to do. Yoink! So we have removed the flange that goes to the motor side of the turbo manifold, and I actually went ahead and remade that flange because the last one that we had was leaking. So we're actually losing a little bit of exhaust gases through our turbo manifold, which is not good, and definitely contributed to probably the lack of boost that we had with the last turbo. It wouldn't have been a crazy change, but you know, any exhaust gas lost is boost lost effectively. Luckily, we've got the old head here. It's actually been really useful because I was able to make a new flange that fits perfectly and it's sealed off really nicely. I know that's sealed now, so we can slip that under here, and that's where we're going to start the turbo manifold effectively, and then we'll weld off this and make sure that this reaches the turbo perfectly. We're utilizing these Allen key head bolts because it makes for way better clearance when we bolt this up. So I've got the turbo manifold sitting in, and we've marked down here where we need to cut off our flange. Then that should weld up pretty well underneath, and then here all we need to do is extend our turbo manifold a little bit just so that this hole meets up properly with the hole underneath. Then we'll make a flange, weld it on, and then this should all bolt up. And then essentially that's the turbo manifold done, which is one of the harder parts of the whole setup.
Someone commented on the last video that I'm just milking this build for content, but the truth is I hate leaving things unfinished, and after we lost the last motor on the dyno, I'm more determined than ever to get this setup working and making real power.
Then we've cut a section out of our turbo manifold, and we're basically just going to extend it a little bit, add this wee guy here, and it kind of just goes together. That's going to be our turbo manifold, which is pretty awesome. Bearing in mind that this is all going to be heat wrapped, so I'm not really fussed too much about how it looks. Obviously we'll try to make the welds as nice as possible, but I'm more fussed about the fact that it doesn't leak, so it's as efficient as possible. Not bad. Turbo manifold all tacked up. Time to final weld it. Let's go.
So here's a video of me talking, but clearly I forgot to turn the microphone on for the camera. But I'm probably saying something about how happy I am with the manifold and how excited I am to put it on our motor. Oh my gosh, I just cracked the biggest high. That was so weird. Anyway, let's throw the turbo manifold onto the motor.
And just like that, our new turbo is mounted. And honestly, for some reason, I think that looks even better than the previous turbo that we had on. It suits the kart so well, but everything worked out super nice. It's all bolted up, and now we need to do the exhaust system. So this is our old exhaust here, and luckily, look at this. It's all gonna line up super nice. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna sacrifice our old turbo. So we're gonna cut the V-band flange off this turbo because I don't have a spare half of a V-band flange, and we're gonna weld that onto the back of our other turbo. Oh, very good. Rainbow gummy flavor, kamikaze. Cheers. That is very tasty. All right, so our turbo is now pretty much ready to go. The V-band is welded up on the rear. I also welded a plate next to the V-band to cover everything up so it's all nice and sealed. We'll tidy that up later, and we'll actually go ahead and paint the rear housing black at some point. Now the next thing we need to worry about are the oil lines that go from the turbo to the engine. So when I was welding the V-band flange onto the back of this turbo, I also went ahead and welded our oil feed fitting to the turbo. Now this is something you wouldn't usually do, but I didn't have the correct fitting, so I went ahead and cut one up, welded it to the turbo. Obviously this is a drift kart, it's not an actual car, so it's more than fine to do that as long as it's all sealed up, which that is. But the other thing we need to worry about is the oil return. So the feed goes into the top of the turbo, the oil return comes out the bottom of the turbo. We have a fitting that bolts on here, so that's perfectly fine. But if we sit our turbo in place, oh, that looks so good, it G's me up every time. So we need to run our oil return from here and we need to run it down to the motor. Now, one really important thing about oil return lines, they always need to be gravity fed, which means they need to be going down. If you have them perfectly flat, the oil pulls up in the line. It has no way of getting back to the motor, and it actually ends up coming out the back into the exhaust through the seals, and it'll be really smoky and annoying. Luckily, because we've top mounted our turbo, it's going to be really easy for us to get that big downward slope. So what we're going to do is I actually have to pull the engine out of the cart because we have to drill and tap a fitting into the case of this engine, and that will allow the oil to go from the turbo back into the sump of the motor. So we're being a little bit cheeky and we're using the vacuum cleaner to make sure that we don't get any swarf into the motor, but we'll also change the oil as well afterwards because this is just the stock oil that comes in these motors. Then we've got our fitting. It's an MPT fitting, so it gets bigger as the thread goes down. And this casting on these are very weak, or just like, you know, average alloy casting because it's China stuff. So this should just go threaded nicely and create its own wee thread. Then we can throw some thread tape on it and we're good to go. That's going in nicely. Very happy with that. So the engine is back in the cart and we can officially start fitting parts so we can get this thing running. The first thing we're going to fit is our throttle body. Now this has a map sensor on top and also has the place for the fuel injector to sit in. It comes with the air fire kit and it's a pretty cool wee piece of kit really. I've got the gasket sitting on there so we can bolt this up, then we can hook up our intercooler cold side. Alright, so that's the cold side intercooler piping all hooked up to the throttle body and the intercooler, and I tell you what, the quality of the workmanship on this intercooler piping is absolutely ridiculous. So shout out to Bailey at Legacy Fab. If you guys need anything done here in Melbourne, hit him up. He is the man. He's ridiculously quick and his work obviously is next level. So we are ready to throw our turbo onto the cart. Like I said before, we have our oil feed up top. We also now have our oil return down the bottom. I had to slightly modify that fitting, but it all bolted up very nicely. So now we just throw this guy right here. Like I said before, we don't have the gasket for here, but this is going to be fine for the first start as is. The hot side intercooler piping going on. Oh, perfect fit, so good. So the last thing we need to run to the turbo is the oil send line. And we are using this oil sandwich plate right here. So basically this is made for an oil cooler on these motors. So as you can see here, there's a line going from the top to the bottom. We've basically just tapped into that line with this setup using the AN fittings, and then it goes straight through here. That'll run to our turbo. So we just unbolt this guy. Oh, Jesus. Just like that, look at that. And we swap it over for this guy. The gasket's still on there, so we are good to go. All right, do the exhaust V-band up. Should probably have chosen a better tool than this though. Hell yeah, look at this. So despite the uncertainty between these two turbos and which one we should use, I've got to say this turbo setup looks right at home on this cart. It looks absolutely awesome. There are a couple of things I will tidy up after the fact, like the oil lines and stuff like that, but we're going to use these for now because what we want obviously is to get this thing running for the first time, and to do that we have to deal with this. So this is the loom from the cart, and I have to basically relearn how all of this goes because I was pretty reckless when I pulled all of this off the cart when we were tearing it down, and I didn't label anything, and I'm certainly paying for that now. Well, let's do the things that we do know first, and that is this goes back here. We're just going to sit it there for now. We know this plugs onto the spark plug, so let's plug that in. Now this is our ECU plug, so this plugs directly into the ECU, so we'll plug him in here. All right, so after a couple of hours of tinkering away on this loom, I think I've finally got it all figured out. Look at this bird's nest we've got going on here. Now this setup isn't too complicated once you get your head around it, but wiring is just not my thing. Luckily, once we get this whole thing figured out and running properly, I'm gonna get my good friend Logan Speed Shop, who did the full custom loom in our fake Lamborghini drift car build, and he's gonna do a full beautiful loom for this thing and make it look super tidy. So technically now when I turn the key, we should see this LED right here light up and we should hear the fuel pump prime. All right, step one of the process is complete. That means that the ECU is powered up, the fuel pump is priming, which means I think now we're ready to push the start button right here. Oh, hey there, guess what? Jump on to twostepgarage.com, grab any of my merchandise. We've got this super sick Lamborghini synthwave design. We've got this old school Slambo built different design. This was one of my favorites, so good. Available in t-shirts and hoodies. There's also a bunch of stickers on there as well. And I also have turbo go-kart merchandise coming very soon. But any order in the next week, I'm gonna throw this turbo in an order, just a random one. I'm just gonna pick it. So if you wanna support the channel, twostepgarage.com. Thank you guys so much. You're all amazing. All right, first start, here we go. Yellow button right here. I think everything's good. We should listen quickly for a tap. Oh my God. That wanted to start immediately, which is a really good sign. Let's give it another one. Hell yeah. So everything seems to be hooked up properly because it's actually wanting to start. Hey, so it runs. Now one thing we do need to remember is this is a 150cc motor, but the tune in the ECU is for our old 125cc motor. So the volume inside this engine is bigger, so it needs more fuel. So likely the reason it won't run and start at the moment is because it's not getting enough fuel into the motor. So now that we know that everything's wired up properly and this thing wants to run, we need to whip out the laptop and have a look at the tune. So the ECU comes with a USB cable. It plugs in right here, just like that. Then we slide over to our laptop, plug a USB cable into the side of the laptop from our ECU, and we open up our AirFiTune software. Like I said at the start of the video, the links to everything that you need are in the description below, including this software that I put in a Dropbox for you and the tunes that I currently have from our 125cc motor. I will put the new tune from the 150cc motor in the Dropbox as well, just for you. So believe it or not, this ECU is fully tunable. We can tune fuel and ignition just like you would on a normal car. As you can see here, this is our fuel table. Now, I'm not gonna muck around with this too much because I don't know a huge amount when it comes to tuning. So I'll leave most of this up to Bogger when we put this on the dyno, which we definitely will do. So look forward to that in a future episode. So we just go to the fuel table here and transform the whole table by 1.5. And just going off the fact that we've gone from 125 to 150cc, that should actually be a little too much fuel, but that'll keep us safe. Also, I think I forgot to mention, but this thing is running on E85 fuel, so that is much safer than pump fuel, and it also smells way better. All right, here we go. I'm a little bit nervous, but key on. All right, ECU's on, fuel pump is primed. We're ready to press start. Here we go. That easy. Look at that. Turbo is spooling. So good. All right, so it runs, but let's see if it revs. Woo-hoo-hoo. I don't know if you can hear that, but this thing has turbo flutter, which is crazy. Oh my God, holy.
At this point, I got really excited, but I wanted to see if we could capture the turbo flutter a little better.
So I quickly fabricated up the world's dodgiest dose pipe that we can bolt onto the front of our turbo. Also, look at the amount of smoke in here. I'm definitely smoking myself out right now.
So I bolted our dose pipe to the front of the turbo and we were ready to go again.
Crude dose pipe installed.
success, we have our turbo flutter. Now I wanted to see if I could adjust the tune to make this thing throw flames on limiter.
Alright, I think it's time we give that poor engine a break, but that is so damn cool. So the goal with this new turbo setup was to get turbo flutter and have a really cool sounding limiter, and I think we ticked both of those things off the list. Flames, turbo flutter, always a big goal of mine, because at the end of the day, this thing is a showpiece and I want to be able to take it to events and entertain people with it. But that has honestly exceeded expectations. Now it's only making about 2 PSI of boost currently, but that's just free revving. So remember, when we load this thing up, it'll make a bunch more boost. So I'm estimating somewhere around the 5 to 6 PSI mark is what we're gonna make with this turbo and this motor. And honestly, I'd say that's about perfect. Any more than that and you'd probably be pushing the limits of what this poor engine is capable of. Now the eagle eye viewer will notice we're not running a wastegate on this turbo. Currently the wastegate is welded shut, and my logic behind that was I thought we'd just let the turbo eat and see how much boost it does make before we decide to put any kind of wastegate on it, because I figured it's probably not gonna make any more than 10 pound of boost anyway, and I'm probably right. 6 PSI looks like it's probably gonna be the go. And now that we have proof of concept, next up we have to tear the thing down. We've got to finish weld the frame, paint it all, put it all back together properly, and not just have it dummy fitted like it is now. Because of course, you guys want to see me ride this thing and hopefully not kill myself, but I also really want to take it to the dyno, and I really want to see some actual power results from this thing. That's gonna be super fun. I cannot wait. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. Don't forget, buy some merch and you could go in the draw to win that turbo. I'm gonna throw it in a random order over the next week or so. And also remember, we're doing weekly live streams now. Facebook Marketplace, scrolling, Assetto Corsa drifting, and just random things in the shop. The live streams are a go, but thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Also, lots of Slambo content coming up with the rotary thing, so get excited for that. Thank you guys, I appreciate you. Peace. Also, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you want, if you feel like it, which I'm sure you do. Bye. We have a limiter, we have turbo flutter, we have all of the good noises, and I'm so freaking happy. Okay, cheers. Bye.